Well, hello there. My name is Robert Garnham, Professor of Whimsy, and I'm here today to do some poems all about aviation. So you may think, well, what's that all about? You're a poet. You do all kinds of whimsical things. Well, one of the things I've been interested in ever since I was very young, for some reason, has been aircraft. I just love flying. I love aeroplanes, and this is something that's gone throughout my whole life, really. I grew up really near Heathrow Airport, and my dad would take me there plane spotting on his day off, and we would go to the top of the multi-storey car park at Heathrow Airport and watch the planes take off and land. The highlight of each day, of course, being Concorde, and 11 o'clock Concorde, and that used to signal the end of our plane spotting sessions. Of course, aircraft these days are seen as environmental dinosaurs, and quite rightly, but let me tell you, back in the day when I was flying them in the early 80s, they were even more gas-guzzling brutes. So what I'm going to do, 7 poems all about aeroplanes and some little bits in between. So this first one is called Everyday Miracles. It shouldn't work, but it does. You rev up the engines, then punch into the absolute, up above the weather, grey wings reflecting the sky and changing colour as cloud gives way to blue. So much else, of course. Roar and throb and movement, the vehement sublimity thereafter of modern comforts, as if in denial of the speed rush, lift and areas of low pressure, aerodynamics and power. This makes mavericks of us all, provides a little thunder for our hearts, a fantastic for the tethered, pushing the bounds of natural behaviour on science, or else pride, expedience, frivolity, design, making monsters from tin and gods of us all. So that was called Everyday Miracles, and that was written probably about 8 years ago from a small collection I did, which was all about the Staines air disaster of 1972, Staines being the town I grew up in. And in 1972, a Trident belonging to British European Airways crashed right next to the bypass. And this one was written not as a poem. This was actually written in a little play I wrote way back in 2008. The play was called Fuselage, and it was about aviators crashed in the desert waiting to be picked up. This is called Show Me the World One Last Time. Show me the world one last time. The wild forests, the frozen glaciers, let me fly above them. My wings throwing down a fleeting shadow which rises up steep valleys. The freedom of the skies. Mountainous white clouds, the shadow of our little plane distorted in the folds and hollows of thunderheads, as if we should find some place cosy to sleep and snooze on high. And the cities, distant cities illuminated at night, tentatively we hang there on final approach, our ears popping, as the old plane shuddering, gliding, watching the lights of the town reveal themselves slowly like constellations growing larger, and soon the runway itself becomes visible. The city, it reaches out a clammy hand and snatches us from the sky. And that was called Show Me the World One More Time. So yes, I've always loved aeroplanes, and I think what I'll do my 3 favourite aeroplanes in reverse order. So third on the list is this wonderful plane, which I've got here on my aircraft top trumps, which I've had since I was about 6. And it is the Vickers VC-10. Now, the thing about the Vickers VC-10 is I first heard about it by mistake because at the time my favourite aircraft was the McDonnell Douglas DC-10. And that's a little spoiler for the next one. And my grandparents got me a model thinking they got the right one, but it was the Vickers VC-10. But I loved it. I loved the shape of it. And then I found out it was made just down the road in Weybridge, near where I grew up. And also it was the fastest aircraft that was not supersonic. It did the fastest crossing of the Atlantic. And I think that record lasted all the way from the 60s right up to just a few years ago when pilots started surfing the jet stream. So anyway, the Vickers VC-10, beautiful aircraft, sleek design, and had a high T-tail, and apparently it was really comfortable. So there we go, that was my number 3 aircraft, the Vickers VC-10. This next poem was written a few years ago, and I wrote it improvised over a backing track, so I'm going to do it without the backing track, so this might be a little weird. It's called Aviator. "Come over here," he said. "You look pretty frazzled for someone who's just fallen out of the sky. I'm an aviator. I've been flying up to Edinburgh with the night mail in my leather jacket and my sexy goggles, and you know what happened? Turbulence happened. I saw the storm right ahead with the thunder and the lightning and the wind and the hail, and I thought, that's gonna tear the canvas off my wings, no problem. I thought, I'm gonna bring her in. I'm gonna bring her down for a landing, and that's how I ended up here in your crabby little town. I landed on the golf course. Sorry about the windmill. You should see what it's done to my Sopwith camel. And then you go and ask if I want a drink. And you know what? After everything that's happened today, that has to be the most satisfying insult of the year. Funnily enough, here's a postcard from your Auntie Edna. Just happened to be next to me in the cockpit. Oh dear. So that was Aviator. And I think what we'll do now, apart from admire my little Boeing 777, which I must admit was much smaller than I thought they actually were, let's look at my second favourite aircraft. It is, of course, the McDonnell Douglas DC-10. Now, when I was a kid growing up near Heathrow, you become pretty aware of the planes that you get most often. And we had the 747s, the TriStars, we had the Tridents, the 111s, the 757s, but we didn't get any McDonnell Douglas DC-10s. So at age 8, we flew to Canada, and on the way back they announced we were going on a DC-10. Now I thought, oh, that's good, that's a plane I've never seen before. But for everyone else who was there, their jaws just opened and dropped, because at the time the DC-10 did have a bit of a reputation of being a bit of a crasher. There was some hideous examples. There's one crashed in Paris, I believe it was Turkish Airlines, I think that was mid-70s. Another one over Chicago, and then there was one that I think it was after that the engine flipped up while it was taking off. So the McDonnell Douglas DC-10 did not have a good reputation. So we were just about to go on it, and I think my mum flipped out. She did not want to go on the DC-10, but we did, and I loved it, and it became one of my favourite aircraft for quite a while, just because it was the sort that you do not see taking off from Heathrow Airport. Anyway, this next poem, it is about the kind of romance, I suppose, when I'm lying in bed at night and I hear an aircraft. What's that noise? A little buzzing aeroplane, tiny buzzing, flying, buzzing, little aeroplane. 2 in the morning. You're hidden by night clouds and I'm lying in bed with the latest bout of insomnia, envisaging your propellers cutting through the mist as you effect your sweet nocturnals. You fill the night with an insistent throb, jarring vibrations, secret missions. I'm down here on sweated sheets. You're up there so cool and calm, all professionalism and various scientific principles, calculated, unflappable optimism. I've been grounded all night. Sleep would be the ultimate takeoff. I've been trundling down the runway, trundling, turning around and giving it another go. Trundling, Garnham Air, you've got permission to take off. I know, I'm trying. Trundling. How mesmerising my town must be from up there. Hypnotised, trance-like by the lights of the Tesco's megastore. From up there you can probably see the curvature of the pier. You might even see what my neighbours have been up to in the backyard these last few weeks, or at least what's causing the smell. All day long you never stop moving from exotic locations bound up with chimerical extravagance and wonder. From Manchester International, a short hop to Edinburgh International. From Edinburgh International, a short hop to Southampton International. From Southampton International, a short hop to Newquay Airport. From Newquay Airport, a short hop to Manchester International. From Manchester International, a short hop to London Stansted. From London Stansted, a short hop to Manchester International. From Manchester International, a short hop to Southampton International. From Southampton International, a short hop to Manchester International. And so on. 2 in the morning. What I really need is a friend. Text messages in the dark, phone vibrations matching your incessant buzz. Hey, Rob, you there? Kiss. How my heart would dance, not like yesterday when all it said was, your bill is available to view online. I imagine you, pristine, skimming voluminous cumulonimbus, just you and the stars and the satellites, floating as if on nothing, with your seamless buzzing, incessant buzzing, endless, powerful buzzing, which actually might just be the central heating pump. So anyway, there was a lot of influence in that poem from the book Wind, Sand and Stars by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, and I probably have pronounced that wrong, but that's one of my favourite books. I reread it a lot. It is just beautiful and powerful. Speaking of books, good link, Robert. I was just flicking through this wonderful little book here, Civil Aviation Today, which let it not be said that I don't read the classics. And I turned to page 88 and there was a picture in there of a CP Air Boeing 747. So what you might think? Well, this CP Air Boeing 747, CP Air, Canadian Pacific Airlines, which now is amalgamated with Air Canada, used to name all of their aircraft Empress of, and then just some random country. This example here is the Empress of India, and this is the actual very first plane I ever flew on. There it is, CP Air, Empress of India in all its glory. And it was just amazing just to look at it and think that was what literally and metaphorically started off my journey with aircraft. This next poem doesn't have a title yet. If I were a giraffe, I'd still want to be a flight attendant, just a heads up. My long neck reaching 8 rows ahead, will you be having the beef or the chicken? Hey, what about us? You've missed out rows 1 to 7. We're hungry back here, and get your swishy tail out of my face. If I were a giraffe and a flight attendant, I'd be able to nuzzle the overhead lockers, no problems there, Jack. I'd clomp down the aisle, do the safety demonstration, getting that fake life vest over my long neck. Slow down with the safety speech, Kirsty, I'm having problems back here. Growing up, I'd seen the planes fly over. I was slightly closer to them, leaving contrails which ripped the sky, invisible demarcations taller than the tallest tree. My friend Colin, the zebra, worked for a while at EasyJet. Hey, freak, the entitled bastard in row 57A says. What's with the long neck? Oh, this, I reply. I forgot to say stop during a facelift. Much laughter. In the galley now, fighting back tears. Another takeoff. Feeling that rhino kick, the engines scream and off we go. The sea chime pings. Bing! That wanker in seat 13C who looked like he'd be high maintenance. I don't even need to unbuckle, just lean the old head right in, scare the hell out of him. Yes? Ah! I want a gin and tonic. I tell him a joke. It goes over his head. Sneak into the cubicle with the hottie from row 5, a signed-up member of the Mile High and a Bit Club. My neck kind of curling around the tight space. It's even more uncomfortable than it sounds. Oh, mama, though it was worth it. Someone's getting an extra pat of butter with his mealtime bap. If I were a giraffe, this is what I'd do. Every morning, proud as I put on that Ryanair uniform, the longest tie they could find, I'd undergo the training, standing in for the emergency slide. Yes, sir? Coffee, madam? Tea, sir? Coffee, madam? If I were a giraffe, if I were a giraffe, if I were a giraffe, this is what I'd do. But it's a tall order. So that was called Poem. And I'm going to go now to number 1 in my chart of favourite aeroplanes. And this will be no surprise to anyone that knows me. That's so tacky. It is. The de Havilland Dash 8. Oh my goodness, a de Havilland Dash 8. I've flown these little things so many times because these were the planes that fly into Exeter Airport. And Flybe, oh Flybe, I do miss you. They would fly me off to exotic places like the Edinburgh Fringe and Newcastle and Manchester and London, and I just got to know these aircraft really well. In particular, one which registration number G-JEDW, which for some reason was one I flew on more than once, and because of its number, I would nickname it Jedward. So every time I would fly with Flybe, going to Gate 1 Exeter Airport, the amusingly named Gate 1 at Exeter Airport, they have one gate, and Jedward would be standing there, and I think, great, it's my old friend again. So I'm going to do now a piece of flash fiction, and it's called The Approach. I could feel the engines throbbing through the joystick. The plane itself skimming the tops of the clouds, throwing down a shadow of our outline. The folds and hollows of the piled cumulonimbus hiding within their fluffy exterior, hail, thunderstorms, bad weather. It's a position I've been in more times than I can remember. The pulsating turbofans of my craft, a comfort. The juddering engines, the pulsating jets, the oscillating power units, all of them at my control. Bing bong! I speak into the cabin intercom using that practised drawl. And ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Captain, oh captain. Yes, I know my surname is Captain. You could say I was destined for this job. We're about 70 miles from Westbury International. If you look out the port side windows, you'll see a lovely view of the folds and hollows of the piled cumulonimbus. So we should begin our descent any time soon. Until then, please feel free to be lulled by the pulsating, oscillating, throbbing, juddering of the engines as they soothe us through the sky. You know, I might even sing to you. Don't, the first officer suggested. Cabin crew, prepare for... landing? Yes, yes. Instinctively, I reach out a hand and stroke the top side of the cockpit controls. Bring us home safely, old girl, I whispered. Captain, oh captain, the first officer, Ben, said. You really are somewhat eccentric. I could feel the engines quaking and gibbering through the controls. Ben, if that is your name. Flying is instinctive. It's a relationship between not only the captain and their machine, but also solid metal and the laws of physics. It's like an affirmation of, I say, are you okay? The sweat was rolling down Ben's face. His upper lip was glistening. He stared straight ahead as if not even noticing the folds and hollows of the piled cumulonimbus. You see, the quivering engines... All of a sudden, Ben yelled, Can't you see it? Don't you understand? You're my father. I was silent for a couple of seconds. But don't try to deny it. You know it's true. I've been waiting years for us to be scheduled on the same flight, just so that I could tell you this. But Brad, we have our pre-landing checklist. It's Ben. Sod the pre-landing checklist. I rose up through the ranks just for this one day, and then the moment I'm with you, Ben let out a sigh. His head silhouetted against the folds and hollows of the piled cumulonimbus clouds. I realise I can never become between you and the love you have for an aircraft, he said. I could feel the vibrations and the trundling of the engines through the controls. So your mother must be Sophie, I whisper. That winsome mechanic whose coquettish charms lit up the engineering hangar all those years ago, resulting in our tryst in the starboard fan cowling assembly. That was 24 years ago. Geez, they're letting you fly planes at 23 years old now? Captain, oh captain, I mean, Dad. The sun shines brightly on the folds and hollows of the piled cumulonimbus. No time to talk. We've got to concentrate. Let's get this baby on the ground. That's what she said. Brad, Ben. We begin our descent. The white fluffy clouds of the cumulonimbus gave way to a deep grey, and the cockpit window was spotted with rain. A slight turbulence flexed our wings as the engines grinded and rattled through the controls. After a while, we were out the base of the clouds and the runway lights were in view. Every landing, I whisper, as we levelled and lined up, is a controlled calamity. And the runway itself seemed to beckon us in much the same way that Sophie had beckoned me into the starboard fan cowling assembly to show me an interesting leak. And then before we knew it, we were down on the ground, wheels touching the runway, reverse thrust applied, throwing us ever so gently into our harnesses. You really only get one shot at this, I tell him. We taxi to the terminal building. You really do, I continue, my mind wandering. So that was a little piece of flash fiction there called The Approach. Little joke there for aviation fans. So I've shown you my favourite planes. I've done a few poems. I've got one left. I've shown you my Boeing 777, which I do get a lot of joy out when no one's watching, just pretending it's coming into landing, just coming down, just giving a little flare just at the last minute, just so that its back wheels skim across the surface of the tarmac safely to land. Okay, this last poem, it's not a very long one, but it was inspired by a visit to my favourite place, which is Brooklands Museum near Weybridge in Surrey. And it's got a wonderful collection of old planes that were made at the factory there, where my granddad used to work way back in the 1930s. He used to cycle there, and it was bombed during the war. It was a lot of people died. The actual factory there that made the aircraft was bombed during the war. And I spoke to an old man. He was sitting in the BAC 111, and it was one of the test aircraft, but it wasn't the first test aircraft. That actually crashed on the A303 near Chicklade back in the late 50s, I believe. So anyway, he was telling me that the aircraft after that were fitted with a parachute. I thought it was a parachute that people could just grab and jump out. Silly, of course, that doesn't work like that. The parachute was actually for the whole aircraft, so that if it got in a stall, the whole plane could be saved, or at least give them a chance. A stall, if you don't know, a bit of a lesson coming up. If a plane is at that, which is called if the attitude, that's what it's called, not altitude, but attitude of the plane is at such an angle that the wings no longer have any efficiency, it basically falls out. So the pilot has to put it into a bit of a dive and then it recovers. But a deep stall is something that only happens to a plane with a T-tail. So the tail, that is up there, and that loses its efficiency if you get turbulence coming off the wings if the nose is high up. That is a deep stall, and this is the last poem I'm going to do. It's called Deep Stall. And then there's the tendency to deep stall. At the Aviation Museum, in a hollowed out fuselage, an old man showed me a parachute. We lost a prototype, he said. It's all to do with turbulence, and the design of the T-tail, the angle of attack, the aspect of its nose. And the parachute, I asked. We never needed to deploy it on the second prototype. We didn't push her like we did with the first. And then I understood that the parachute was not for the pilot, but for the whole aircraft itself. It would have given them a fighting chance to improve the attitude of the vehicle, he said. And I was left with preposterous images, and the thought that the parachute must have been very big indeed. The old plane smelled of oil and damp. The old man smelled of lunchtime wines. He was an enthusiast. There's corrosion everywhere, I thought, and technology becomes obsolete. Well, anyway, thank you so much for watching these poems. I'm going to leave them on Facebook so that you can watch them again if you want. And I hope you all have a really good weekend. My name is Robert Garnham, Professor usually of Whimsy, signing out. Goodbye. Thank you very much. It's not turning off.